this theme in contemporary practice, this new emerging trend of architects doing research, so beyond academia, but actually bringing research into practice and applying it, is taking place in the work of the panelists here. And for example, the work of 3XN has a research and development group which is doing sustainability research. And as all parts of society are becoming more engaged with technology and aspects of sustainability, of course we're finding this in practice. And it's interesting how architects are responding to this challenge in doing things like internal research groups and also with specialist consultancies like Gary Technologies here. One of the themes that will be discussed by some of the panelists, of course, is networks and collaborations and new ways of connecting beyond the traditional design team and the building project team, bringing in new influences, new expertise, and trying to engage with innovation.
A couple of years ago, we had an exhibition called Mind Your Behavior. It's not about telling people how to behave, but more about how all architecture creates behavior. And we analyzed all our latest buildings to see how did they, what sort of behavior did they create. And started with this building that's a building for, it's Ørsted College building. It's a high school. It's a high school without classrooms. It's a new school reform. And the whole idea about this internal is that it should create interaction between the students, and the students should learn maybe even more from each other. This is the way that they work daily. And it has been a great success. The building should not have only one function. It could be a multifunctioning building. It has to blend into this small society, of course. But the idea was we wanted to create something that had a social function to it too. So we created a little plaza here on the ground floor. That is the plaza where they have events. They have Christmas trees, parties, and small concerts and stuff like that. So the bank becomes more than a bank. It becomes a community building as well. And then the cladding and the outside is where we come in and like to play a little bit with our GXN, with the facades and the facade materials and how we design the facade. I think this is some of the future things you have to think about. Not so much maybe in Stockholm where they have a lot of nature, but if you come to Mumbai, or you come to some of the big cities, New York, I think we have to think of other ways to build and to create living environments where you can have vertical farming within the building community too. That could be very interesting.
With authoring, first of all, what we do is we implement concurrent design system on each of our projects. We manage the model and we make sure that every piece of the project, every part of the project is 3D modeled, and we have a facade model, we have a MEP model, structure model, and an architecture model. And not only as a volumetric expression, but also as all kind of structured metadata, building metadata that comes with it, such as quantitative data about lengths and areas, and also qualitative data, for example, materials, are also stored in the model. And the model becomes more and more not just like a volumetric expression of a design intent, but it carries also all kind of metadata with it and becomes the project database. Now the question is, how do you make this data available for other engineers, for subcontractors, for the client, and how do you distribute the data so that you actually can look at multiple systems together and do clash detections to kind of really make better planning. Especially what it makes it more and more complicated, and most of the projects that we work on are globally distributed, like complex documents are authored by globally distributed teams. And not only this, they are, everybody might produce the data, but it's really complicated to share because different authoring softwares are being used. And what we suggest is, on many of the projects, is that we actually work with web-based 3D models. We centralize the model and we decentralize the access. And one example being these, on the Louis Vuitton Foundation, we were challenged with the rebuilding of these design glass surfaces, and integrate and build them out of discrete glass elements. And what we did in this case, we built parametric design components that would integrate installation constraints, fabrication constraints. About it, what you see here is kind of glass bending, and integrate them into parametric design component, and then just let the computer negotiate all of these different constraints and come up with the best fit. And we really went through like millions of iterations and had the computer basically solve that problem, this like nonlinear problem, on the cloud.
While working globally on different locations on different continents, I have to tell you, that taught me quite a bit about how different local conditions can be and how much you have to relate what you're doing to the local context. Because one piece of architecture in one continent, one location can be right and can be completely wrong in another location. And that knowledge and is very much the fundamental base for our discussions when we talk about sustainability and a perfect integration of the architecture that we're doing in the natural environmental environment. When you look at this project, this is, you might not expect it, but it's a dental clinic in Berlin. And the reason to go for a very ambitious design and very friendly, open, colorful atmosphere was, of course, a very simple reason to take away the fear from the people. Everybody knows that. So when you go to a dentist and come in there, and it's very positive, and you feel like you can look into all the treatment spaces. It's very transparent. It's a very light atmosphere, and the architecture invites you to access it, to really touch it and behave in it differently, then I think we achieved the goal that we were trying to achieve. The important point for me is that sometimes innovation means also to rediscover things that had been forgotten, very, very low-tech knowledge that is there, that can be easily used. And it's more about being smart, not too much to invent too much. And in some cases you might even find that while doing so, in the end you end up, and that's the hospital and the aerial view, with forms that very much relate also to the circular houses in Addis Ababa and so on. So this very particular study of a location can lead to very different types of architecture.
And then we had to figure out the technology, because innovation always related to technology, but we are not really interested in technology, I think. Using simple technology or feasible technology to make something new is a real innovation. I think nowadays a lot of people are being slave of technology. So that's why I think you can see a lot of boring buildings, win a lot of green building award, but I think in 10 years, 20 years, those buildings will become outdated because of technology. You can see the contrast between this tower and the conventional boxes. The conventional boxes is all about volume, height, and showing the power, strength. I think that's something wrong with our city. Like modern cities, we're building high-rise to show your capital, showing your power. So the whole modern city is about a competition. It's about competition between people or competition between people and nature. But here we think maybe in the future of the city, we should introduce more nature into modern architecture. And here you can see the urban space between two towers. I think that's also unique because everywhere when we want to build a twin tower, they copy.
What I think is that we will design these buildings or design cities. It becomes more and more complicated, and becomes more and more knowledge has to be integrated in one consistent model. And I think that the aspect, and especially if it's like globally distributed teams, the aspect of the management of this organizational complexity is really is a real challenge. And what we are interested in is really exploring social networking techniques on the one hand, and also just exploring digital design techniques or digital processes to help with the improvement of the design and construction of buildings.